A warm welcome to all of you, both you joining here with us live, but also you watching online. I'm very pleased to be here. I've looked very much forward to this transition session, focusing on is the construction sector becoming sustainable? Today, we have a very interesting panel with us, both here physically and online, and I will look forward to introduce him to you a bit from now. But first, my name is Helle Redder Momsen. I will tell you a bit about where I am and what we are today working on. So I come from the Danish Authority of Housing and Social Services, and where we are in the process of implementing the Danish National Strategy for Sustainable Construction. I'm here today as head of the Nordic program we have on Nordic sustainable construction. So, are we becoming sustainable? I will take you on a little story. It started with a vision. So back in 2019, the Nordic prime ministers and larger CEOs came together and made a vision of the Nordics to become the most sustainable and integrated region in the world by 2030. So at that time, housing and construction ministers said to reach that aim, we need to change the way we build. So they made a declaration focusing on low carbon principles and circular principles in the construction sector. That was then followed by a declaration just a few months ago by the now current ministers for housing and construction that reconfirms the principles in the declaration from 2019, but further focus specifically on more intense methods for low carbon solutions, a way to try to see if we can have alignment and harmonization of the methods we use to calculate the climate impact from our buildings, but also a specific focus on the construction site, because we see that a lot of emissions can be reduced from that site, and also there's a lot of waste and pollution that can be minimized. And then the last part, it really focuses on the potential in preserving the existing building stock and the existing square meters that we have. So these are some of our new guidelines of what to implement. But to reach some of these goals, we have a Nordic collaboration amongst all the Nordic countries that focus on 5 different areas. So there's one that focuses on legislation. What legislation can we implement to actually reach some of these aims? So this is run by the Ministry of Environment in Finland. We have another one run by Nordic Innovation that focuses on how can you have circular business models and how can you use that procurement muscle that the cities have. And then we have this one, it's run by a non-profit organization called Form Design, and they really try to enrich the debate. What is a sustainable construction material and what role does architects have to play? And then the fourth is run by the Ministry of Infrastructure in Iceland, and they focus specifically on the construction side and have made some really nice materials on that. And then the fourth is run by us in Denmark, and it focuses on education material for vocational trainers on how to build with reused materials. And of course, to communicate and share all the knowledge that we are creating together. So this is what the Nordic countries are doing together, and our overall aim is to minimize the environment and climate impact from construction. So it's a rather huge program. We put a lot of efforts into it. One of the things we do is to try to harmonize or align our legislation. So the Nordic countries have very ambitious and Estonia, carbon neutrality goals. But to reach them, we need to do something also within our construction sector. It's a bit difficult to see on the slide, but Sweden were the first to demand that when you build a building, you have to calculate the climate impact. Following them came Norway, and then Denmark also came in 2023. And you can see more has it planned. Denmark also implemented by January this year a carbon limit. We call it a limit value. So you have a budget, economic budget when you build, but we also introduced a carbon budget. So when you build new, that is over 1,000 square meter, you cannot emit more than what's equivalent to 12 kilogram CO2, 12 kilograms CO2 per square meter per year. So that's a limit. And that target will be revised every second year. So we are currently negotiating it, 2025, 2027, and 2029. That means that by 2029, of course, it's a political agreement, it can be even more ambitious, but by 2029, 9 out of 10 construction companies have to change method. So we need input. We need all this innovation that we will talk about today, and that the construction sector is changing fast. We see a lot of change already, and we want to spur that today. So I would really love your input, because to get that change happening, you need to see what's coming in the future. So I'd like you all to go to menti.com and use this code 27 31 71 24 and tag it in and say, what words do you imagine will characterize how we construct in 2040? I think the answer is very different from different places around the world, but I also think it's very interesting. So in the first part of this session, we will sum up and see your answers. But please, both you online, please do it, and you here physically, go into Menti, and we will actually see your input, and we will take it in and use it as part of our way forward. And with that, I'm very pleased to now invite on stage Simone Margelli, who is an executive CEO of the Carbon Neutral City Alliance. Welcome, Simone. And with us online, we today have, yes, very nice, we have Emilia Walport, who's a material specialist from ORB, Global Materials, for the decarbonization of materials. And we have Raj, who is Raj Kaili, who's a mission lead from Dark Matters Lab. Welcome to you as well, and thank you for being here. Despite it being digital, it's very good to have you here. So, I will ask a similar question to, I'll just find a way to get this, and also have my time. So, I would like to start by asking you a similar question, but maybe a bit more specific. Sorry. So, often the construction sector is not known as a first mover and one that changes very fast. There are good reasons for that, but still it's very important to see this change. So I would like to start by asking you, Raj, how do you think we'll construct or build environment by 2040, and what are some of the biggest changes and what challenges have we overcome? You will start, Raj, and then Emily, you will follow, and Simone. So a short but interesting reflection from all of you. Thank you. Raj, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much. I'll try to keep it very short and interesting, most importantly. Thank you for this. I think from my perspective, Raj, I think it's all going to be about...
Please.
All okay?
Yes, great.
Oh, sorry. Okay. I was just going to say that I think from my perspective, what we do in the future is going to be greatly impacted by what we do with our available carbon budget between now and that future. And I think, like with many things that we do in terms of how we look at future risks and how we actually allocate what we actually can do within those constraints. I think it's going to be about what is going to be our available carbon budget, what makes sense with that available carbon budget, and given that that's already under a lot of constraints, I think it's going to be the main driver for how we build and whether we build new build or we do renovations and so on and so on. But I think that's for me the key driver is how do we govern it? How do we regulate that carbon budget? Obviously, with more regulation, does also requires a lot more of a systemic agreement between all the parties that are actually users of that budget. So I think that's going to be the main driver.
Thank you, Raj. Very interesting. And Emily, please.
Thank you and good afternoon. So 2040 really is not that long away, and the reality is that much of the built environment that we'll be using then has already been built. So I think that we're going to be focusing a lot on adaptation, repurposing of these assets to best support the needs of our society in 2040. That said, it's clear that we are going to continue to need to build more. And whilst I hope there will be a greater adoption of bio-based and other low impact circular materials and solutions, there's also great need for rapid decarbonizations of our critical construction materials, which will continue to be in demand through the next decade. We're already seeing great strides made by these material supply chains around decarbonisation, but their investment cycles are very long. The investment required to decarbonise is very significant. So as consumers, designers, we really need to provide repeated clear signals to demand urgent transition to lower carbon solutions over the next decade, if not sooner, to ensure that those materials that we'll be using in 2040 have a much lower impact on our planet than they do right now. From a design perspective, I think we're also seeing great shift towards efficient design, recognizing that the best thing we can do is to use as little new material as possible. And we're also seeing really exciting, I think, exploration of new aesthetic goals. So driving towards an aesthetic that really celebrates sustainable materials and sustainable design, as opposed to one that seeks to kind of have an ideal of flawless perfection at all costs.
Thank you very much. A lot of good input. I'm scribbling down. So, Simone, please, the same.
Hello. Hello. Yep. Good afternoon. Thank you for having me. Simone Mangili from the Carbon Neutral Cities Alliance. We are a member-driven alliance of 22 global cities who have set themselves very ambitious climate targets, often more ambitious than national targets. We're talking about 2030, 2035, and so forth. And we provide the opportunity for those cities to innovate together, to collaborate, to share learnings, and so forth. And we're supporting them in embodied carbon work. And the vision that we're sort of promoting with our cities around the built environment in 2040 is one that, first of all, seeks to build for durability, build to last, right? The best thing that we can do to reduce emissions is to extend the life cycle of the buildings that we currently have and the ones that we'll be building. Secondly, as we've already said, decarbonizing traditional building materials is going to be absolutely key, but so is the integration of bio-based materials that not only have a low carbon footprint, but also have the ability to store carbon in the future. Thirdly, we envision in 2040 that buildings are built with deconstructibility in mind and the ability to reuse the materials within those buildings to upcycle them for new spaces, for retrofits, and for other purposes. We strongly believe that land use planning will need to keep these targets in mind, so maximizing infrastructure so that the configuration of buildings and typologies of buildings is really sort of maximizing the embodied carbon within infrastructure as well. We aspire that nature-based solutions and green infrastructure will be integrated from the very beginning into the entire planning and design process to maximize the carbon sequestration potential, but also other ecosystem services such as shading and cooling and water management and so on. And lastly, but not least, we envision a built environment that's conceived of, and the processes and systems that sort of generate the built environment are, from the very beginning, thought of as opportunities to increase people's welfare, people's livelihoods, and to regenerate natural systems.
Thank you very much. Very interesting. So that area focus as well. Yeah, use what we have in the best possible way. So thank you very much. Oh, yeah. Not tilting that one. I asked you in the beginning to enter your words, so I don't know if there were some overlaps, but and more has arisen, so we had a multimedia, and also for you online. So I'd like to ask if we can see it. And I will actually take, I have someone taking that picture. Okay, yes, slower, reusable, planning, automated, diversity, built to last. Yeah, that was a good one. A lot of good ones. Thank you so much for the input. We'll bring it all with us. And we'll actually now go a bit deeper. Yes, so we have that. I don't know if we can still see. No, yeah. For those of you who joined a bit later, you're still welcome to enter your input if you want to. But now I would like to dig a bit deeper and hear about some of the things that have actually been implemented. Because, Simone, you work with some of the most ambitious carbon neutrality goal cities, and I would like to hear what tools have you developed to actually utilize that procurement muscle? What do you see is happening in the cities? And maybe if you can also have a bit of a look into what do you see that the cities do to utilize the existing square meters as well as possible?
Sure. Thank you again. At CNCA, we've been supporting a whole cohort of cities in Europe to explore what policy levers they have at their disposal to help reduce embodied carbon in the built environment. This is being a member-driven organization. Our cities came to us back in 2019, 2020, seeking support, guidance in exploring this realm further, the policy levers. And so we created a policy framework called Drastically Reducing Embodied Carbon in the Built Environment, which maps 59 policy levers at the disposal of cities across various macro areas, from land use and zoning to building regulations to public procurement to municipal buildings to circular economy and waste management processes and so on. That framework really sort of laid out quite clearly the areas that cities could try and focus energies on in the near future. But of course, we did it across global geographies because our cities are across the entire boat. So in the last few years, we've been trying to contextualize that, help cities understand what policy levers they actually have at their disposal in their jurisdictions based on the competencies that they have. And in each of those policy areas, really try and focus in on what are the most sort of accessible policy levers that cities have. So we've been working with a cohort of 12 cities in Europe to do that. We did technical assessments for each of those cities with in partnership with a number of technical groups. And now cities have been going forward and piloting, implementing some of those policy levers, and it's really exciting to see. But one of the areas that we found that cities needed a great deal of support with was really getting a handle on bio-based materials. That was the area that I think our policy officers, our planners, climate leads, sustainability directors really needed more support with, not only for themselves and understanding sort of what are the materials in structure, in facade, lining, insulation, et cetera, that they could use, but also have a tool that they could use to work with and across administrations, because, as you know, climate officers are not necessarily in charge of permitting and procurement processes and waste management processes, so they needed a tool to understand better for themselves the breadth of materials that are available, but also something that they could work with across city departments and even out towards the public and upwards towards the decision makers. So we created, in 2022, we partnered with Arup to create a handbook for cities to do just that, to lay out the performance characteristics of bio-based materials, the procurement processes involved, and the potential uses and so forth, while also mapping the policy frameworks within the European context and some of the challenges and opportunities available and some of the best use cases around. So it's been, that is about to be published. It'll be available through our website, and it'll be a tool that'll be accessible for all to use. Some of the best cases that we've been seeing have been really exciting. The Stockholm Coal Wharf redevelopment, which takes a very contaminated site and does in situ remediation, so really lowering the carbon emissions from the decontamination process, but then does a great deal of circular rebuilding involved. The Stockholm Gas Works, which has been converted into an indoor climbing and recreational facility, reusing a lot of the industrial design elements from the original gasworks building, a new theater that's being converted from the actual gas silo. We've been seeing things in Amsterdam with the conversion of existing buildings, using circular materials from the lining of canals, from other buildings that have been deconstructed. We've been looking at Nantes. We had a great site visit earlier this year. Nantes Métropole in France has been working to deconstruct old manufacturing sites, store the material, redesign the building, and then re-employ some of the same materials in the redevelopment process. So we've really seen quite a great deal of innovation out there on the bio-based material. Helsinki's building, a whole entire new wood city. Stockholm is building an entire new wood city. We know Copenhagen and others are also leading the way. So it's been really exciting.
Sounds like you have a lot of good examples and even a tool to get it into the administration and part of that procurement muscle. Very interesting. Is it possible to see some of those or read about those cases somewhere?
Absolutely. So part of the work that we do is trying to amplify our theory of change. Our cohort of cities are charting the course towards carbon neutrality, but the entire objective is to then amplify those learnings. And so we've been making communication materials that help share the lessons, YouTube videos that with the people who have been working on those projects. They're available online. I can provide the links to 2 projects in Amsterdam, the Stockholm Coal Wharf and Gaswork project, the Helsinki Wood City, and so forth. So there's quite a bit of material out there. There's also some fact sheets, some Q&A docs, and the new tool, the new handbook that we've developed with Arup.
Very nice. So we will keep an eye when some of that, some is already there, and when the handbook is there, we'll keep an eye on that as well. Thank you very much. I think from the Nordic countries side, we see that one can, as a nation, go forward, but of course it helps a lot when cities, or some of the cities, start competing amongst each other and really show what road is possible. And of course you have to make mistakes when you go forward, also if you do it fast, but having that fostering of knowledge amongst each other, I think it sounds very powerful. Thank you very much, Simone. That was very interesting. So now I'd like to go over to you, Emily. I know that as part of our program, we also look into some of those opportunities for material development. And you in ARP have been behind this, what we call Blue Marine Bio-Based Alliance. I would like to hear if you can share some of the results and some of the things that you see in your position, what's happening with products these days in the construction sector and the demand.
Yeah, thank you. Perhaps I'll start just by giving a little bit of context to how this Building Alliance came about. So, as we've already heard, with our great focus of the industry towards decarbonisation, we're really looking for new materials with a lower impact to replace and augment some of our traditional construction approaches. And bio-based materials are of great interest. Simone gave some great reasons for that, both around their lower embodied carbon, but also the fact that many of them sequester carbon during growth and can be locked away within our buildings. Until recently, much of the focus of our kind of looks towards bio-based materials has been towards land-sourced biomaterials from resources like timber, hemp, straw. But increasingly, we're seeing interest and focus towards resources from our marine environments. So in particular in the Nordics, there's this focus towards the blue bioeconomy. And accordingly, this consortium was brought together earlier this year, really to explore the potential opportunities of the use of marine-sourced biomaterials in construction. This is a nascent industry, and what a consortium approach has enabled us is to bring together parties across the public, private sector, academia, in order to bring together all the different perspectives and really to understand both what the current status is of this industry, but also what some of the key challenges, barriers and opportunities are for further adoption of marine bio-based materials. So it's been an incredibly interesting study. It's been led by our colleagues in Copenhagen. And we've been speaking to researchers, growers of materials like seaweed, environmental consultants in Iceland, the food industry, government players, to really get a very holistic understanding of what the current situation is. And the reason for that broad stakeholder engagement as well is that this is a very interlinked bioeconomy. So the resources that we're talking about with potential application for our construction industry are also resources that are critical for the biosphere. They're utilised in the food sector, in pharmaceuticals. And so one of the focuses of the work has really critically been around understanding what the impacts might be if we are to utilise these resources for the construction industry to the broader environmental system and other supply chains. So we've been similar to the work that the CNCA has been doing around land-based biomaterials. Our team has been pulling together a technical playbook on marine-based low-carbon construction, which will be pulling together the findings from all of these different engagements across the supply chain, presenting some of the kind of nascent technologies that are coming to the fore, and some of these key impacts and challenges that we need to consider, as well as the opportunities for helping us build lower carbon, but also healthy, safe spaces for our societies. So that report will be published early in 2024. Yeah, I think it's going to be a really useful first report to talk to this topic. There's still a lot of uncertainty, unknowns, and I think that perhaps we can talk about that in a bit more detail later. But a real need as well highlighted for further research and development of products to meet the needs of both our construction industry as well as our planetary system.
Thank you. Very interesting, and also interesting the last part you touched upon. And by the way, to ensure that what we construct with these materials is healthy and safe, at least how we see it working with the building regulation. These dilemmas, you can say, in construction are super important and actually quite difficult when we work with new products, new methods, or even old products that we are not so aware of and that we would love to stand very long in our built environment. So I agree that it's a lot that we still need to research, but I think it's also very important to get out there, at least when we have the carbon budgets and the limits we need to meet. Thank you very much, Emily. That was very interesting. And now over to you, Raj. So I know at Dark Matters Lab you have a different test because you also want to see what are the barriers there when you work very much across sectors. And I know that you also know a lot about the financing. So one of the things I find very interesting of the things that you are doing is both you have a digital focus, which is also one of the things we're looking at, and you also look not only at new build and how to do that with biobase, but also on existing buildings and how to renovate that. So I don't know if you can put some words on that, and maybe also to what extent that is a good investment. Because of course we have a lot of forces, and those with a lot of money has a lot. So to what degree is it a good investment also to transform existing building stock, or should you just tear it down, all the materials, and build new?
Yeah, thank you. Actually, while I was listening to both Emily and Simone about the many great examples of the work that is being done, I started to think about, well, if you could do that at scale, then that's where we need to be. And so one of the things that we're thinking is that, first of all, going from renovating existing buildings rather than new build is almost out of necessity. Again, as in my opening remarks, I'm focusing like a broken record on risk budgets, and in this case, we're talking about a very tight. I don't think there's a lot of buffer left in a carbon budget. I don't think there's a lot left in a global carbon budget, or even when you come down to various communities or regions. So if you know that you've got those kinds of constraints, then I think it's out of necessity that we need sort of a much more focus on renovating existing buildings to support long-term sort of carbon sequestration in building, especially around, say, for example, timber, which we all know is a resource that is under huge constraints right now. I'm concerned about the fact that you need to look after these particular types of resources over multiple years. And in this case, for example, how do you look after timber for over 200 years? So I think there's a lot of these, maybe, people like myself that are, in the capital markets and finance, we think about these things about how do you actually finance, whole scale retrofit, for example. And when I think about that, and I think about the examples again that, Simone and Emily were giving, I focus sort of on that, is that, these require huge outlays of cash. And although all of these projects, and, we're engaged in various projects across many, many European cities, we're working with, for example, a large local authority in London regarding how would you actually do retrofit, where you've got a commingled portfolio of private housing, you've got non-private housing and assets, and that these require very multiple forms of capital and different sources of capital. So I think it's almost out of necessity that we really need to take a look at what can we do in terms of renovating existing buildings, doing light to medium to whole retrofit across that. But just as importantly, I think it's about how do we actually manage the very constrained resources, whether it's from the fact that they're going to become even more scarce, or price volatility and price swings. There are geopolitical factors to take into account, and for that matter, I think is I think the real reason why we should focus on staying with doing what we can in terms of the renovating existing buildings.
Thank you very much, Rush. So we need to focus on the existing building because of scarcity, of carbon budget, and I guess many other kind of resources, or pollution, or what do we have? So I would actually like now to say thank you for all your very different and very different and very good input. I think you supplemented each other very good. We have one more Mentimedia, so I don't know if I can get it on the screens. Yes. So I would like all of you here, both physically and also you online, to answer this question, and then I will also ask our panelists to give their input to it. But we don't have all the resources in the world. There are a lot of different things that we could do a lot more better. We can hear that a lot of it is already being looked into. It's getting into the procurement muscles. The finance sector is looking into it. There are materials that are available. But what other areas should we focus our resources in the coming years to make sure that construction will go in a more sustainable direction? So if you go into Mentimedia, we have put some different options, and please put in your selections. What do you think is most important? We can't do it all, but what do you think that maybe every country, and we in the Nordics will look at your answers, should focus our input on? And while everyone is filling in your input, I will also ask our panel, what we have heard a lot of good cases. So do you think some of these, a new way of building, use the existing building stock better, actually get finance to the existing stock? Do you think it's possible to scale it? And do you also think that we have the skills needed? Because of course we can build or retrofit with new things, but what happens if we don't do it the right way? Is there anything we can do to minimize the fault and errors that is already spending way too much resources at the moment? And also this one, what transitions are you seeing that we are not yet addressing? So now they've been talking, I would like to maybe hear a comment from your side, Simon.
Yep. So first off, I couldn't agree more with Raj. We're really starting to focus our efforts moving forward in the next phases of our project on renovation retrofits. We're deeply aware that in the European context, the future of the building are the building stocks that we already have. And so retrofitting for long-term use, for adaptable, flexible spaces, and continued sort of reinvention of usage of the built environment, I think will be key. In terms of scaling, I'm very optimistic. I think we're seeing it happen already. Earlier today, the buildings breakthrough was announced. The cement breakthrough was announced for low carbon cement and abated cement. And at the same time, the Forest Climate Leadership Partnership, focusing on how to really create sustainable, durable, equitable value chains for bio-based materials into the future. So we're seeing cities already go this way. You mentioned the national standard of 12 kilograms in the Danish context. We know that Helsinki has set their own standard, and other cities have been working on this for quite some time and are in the process of really scaling up. And as I said earlier, sort of our theory of change is that as these levers and opportunities are consolidated, they get amplified and shared out and taken up more broadly. In terms of what's happening on the screen, to a very great extent, I think all of this is absolutely key in the transition. We need all of the levers that we can. If I could, I would say circular economy in the end, I think, is the paradigm within which we sort of have to envision the built environment moving forward. The ability to use our materials in the most effective, durable, reusable way possible, storing carbon, and really planning for the adaptability of spaces in the built environment. I think that's key. So. I think we have a lot of work cut out for us, but I think our cities are leading the way, and hopefully many others will follow.
Thank you for a very positive and optimistic note. It's happening. We just need to speed it, and we need all of it. Thank you. So now I'd like to move to you, Emily. What is your input to the questions? What's
Yeah,
happening?
of course. So, I mean, I agree with everything Simone said. I'm also optimistic. Scale is beginning to happen. We need to scale. We don't really have a choice at this point. We will not be able to meet our decarbonisation targets, as well as, minimising the impact to broader planetary boundaries as well, if we don't start to scale and start to scale very rapidly. I think that in terms of all of those different factors on the slide, many of them are interrelated. The adoption of low carbon materials and bio-based materials is beginning to happen. But there are also some significant challenges we need to overcome around kind of having technical understanding of the performance of these materials, how they fit within codes, standards, traditional insurance approaches. So these, many different parts of the supply chain need to come together to really first understand what these barriers are and then come up with approaches to overcome them. They're not insurmountable. They just need collaboration and focus. I think that one of the great strides forward in the last 5-10 years has been around kind of how data informed we are. So when we start to calculate the impacts, whether that's embodied carbon, biodiversity, loss or net gain, we start to have much greater insight about the impacts that we're having through our design and consumption of materials. And I think it's a really exciting future that we're seeing, where we are much more data informed, enabling us to make informed choices and changes. Because where we aren't informed, we may have the right intentions, but actually have unintended consequences. So just focusing solely on carbon, for example, might have negative impacts to wider eco-biospheres, or to the people along the full supply chain, or those that are occupying our built spaces. So I think that it's absolutely possible. I think we need to work across the breadth. I think that the circular economy kind of framework is a very well-defined kind of holistic approach to the way in which we approach the design operation of our built environment and wider sectors. And so it's a great place to focus.
Thank you very much, Emily. Very interesting. So we also need to see where the challenges are. Technical standards, insurance are noted down. For sure that is needed as well. Because, of course, we don't want to make it more expensive if that is possible. Because maybe the social element of sustainability is not that happy with that. Thank you very much, Emily. So, Raj, please. Sorry, Emily. Raj, please.
Yeah, again, to everything that Emily as well as Simone said, I think we do, I think, ultimately need to figure out how do you actually finance the entire life cycle of material you use, and that is not an easy one to crack. And I think that's the only way you can actually build the frameworks. And it's not just about financing the entire life cycle. It's also about understanding how do you organize and govern that particular process. So, for example, you could think of how we would create for example, a circular timber trust that will actually be able, circular timber trust, and also financing would come from that, just as an example of using timber. So I think it's about understanding how to finance it, given that there is still a huge outlay of capital that you need, but also how do you then actually govern that particular process and manage that process, given that these are very constrained and volatile resources going forward.
Yes, so we'll come back with an answer on how to finance it in COP29, isn't it, right? Great, thank you. Okay, hopefully. So I will now actually like to see the result from the Mentimeter, please. And then I will also, there is a few minutes for questions, so if you have a question somewhere there, it is possible. I think also the climate resilient is quite interesting because we can build with a lot of materials now, but if it's not climate resilient, and is that then more construction materials or not? It's definitely not an easy road, but there's a lot of knowledge out there, and I really like both what you say, that it's scaled, it's happening, it's out there, and what Emily said, that we have a lot of the solutions, and we just need to also get more cases to actually see it implemented, and then the finance there. But we need all of it, as Emily said. It's not an either or. They are very interconnected. Of course, it's difficult to take it all in one go. So thank you very much. And then maybe to the slides. Yes. Yes, I got your answers, and it's noted from my colleagues at home as well. Yes, so I think we got a lot of input now that carbon budgets are being implemented. Denmark was just the first country. As far as I'm informed, then Sweden, Finland is coming in 2025, and Iceland is following. Estonia is in the process of defining what they will do, and I know that the Energy Performance of Building Directive, at least in an EU level, is currently very much in the discussion, and where it is an element. I don't know if they will finish it this year, but of course we hope, at least in the Nordics, we're really pushing forward with that, and I think there's a lot of places where there is a focus on it, because I think that is a key driver. But to be able to implement, of course, we need the cities to show us the way, we need the products to be implemented, and the finance to be there. So I don't know if there's anyone who have a question they would like to ask, or consideration, or reflection. Yes, there's a brave one. Please say where you're from and your name.
Hi, my name is Karin Alden, Sweden product manager at Sundahus Arbeiter Group. So I have a question for Simone regarding this handbook and the material. One issue that prevents reuse of materials, which we all agree is required, is that you know what you have in the materials. Otherwise, it might be fishy whether you want to use it or not. Is there anything in your documentation that supports this, or how this can be formulated in a procurement situation or so forth?
For the reuse of materials, or for new generation bio-based materials? Or?
So keeping data, yeah. During the life cycle.
Yeah, that's a great question. I think this is one of the areas that our cities are struggling with as well. So understanding when they do deconstruct and when materials are being stored, how can those materials be certified after their first use, their properties that they maintain, and who will ensure their use in certain applications. So that is a challenge, and it's some that our cities are focusing on, is how to essentially create a material hub that does just that, that's able to both store materials, but also certify their characteristics and performance and quality moving forward. But it's a great question. For the reuse of materials, this is a big sort of area that energy needs to be focused on moving forward.
Yes, and maybe I'd like to add to it, because a part of our program, we will be developing teaching materials for teachers at vocational schools, so those teaching carpenters or bricklayers, and that focus on how to build with reused construction materials. And of course, first, then we need to know, to start that, is there already education materials? So there isn't, but on our website, we have a mapping of what materials is there. And we also map the current regulation in the Nordic countries that focus on this. And part of that is the European Construction Product Regulation that regulates how a product can be placed on the market. And part of the revision that's currently ongoing is that you will have to have some kind of standard for the reused materials. And I think, I know that we are working on that. And for the specific data, I know that, and I will just say it, Rush, because we don't have much time, but Dark Matter Lab have something they call a MAT-R, where they actually have a method of how to map all the building components in a building and to put it into an open format in a database so it can interface with others. There are projects in Denmark, Circle Bank, that does the same. There's a lot of that happening. So I think it's a part of maybe connecting it. And of course it links to the EU's digital passport and what is it, the Eco Design Directive that just came into force yesterday. So I think it is really on the move. Yeah. A last question, and please say your name again, but thank you for a very good question.
Michael from Uganda. I run a radio station. I also run...
maybe closer to the mouth and
Sorry.
repeat.
Michael from Uganda.
Perfect.
I run a radio station in Uganda. I also run a vocational technical institute, and I'm also small time in construction.
Okay.
I'm facing a sustainability conundrum here, especially from the answers that have been given. When you compare regeneration, renewable biomaterials with the aspect of building to last, and also considering that new generations come with new innovations, they have new social labor needs, and when you build construction to last, some of these buildings will become an eyesore in society, they will become outdated, and then the materials are, built to last. So where is the element of reusability, recycling, and so on in that kind of? Thank you.
Thank you. That's a very good question. And it's one of the things I love about constructions, that they are built in their different time. And it's really difficult to predict how they would love to live in, I don't know, even maybe 2050 or 2070. But I think that a lot of things is actually happening in the field of how to build. So in Norway, they implemented a regulation that when you build new, you have to build so that it's possible to disassemble it again. So they are the first I've known that put in this regulation, and I know also that Matt have some tools of how to do it. But I think there is also a balance, like should you build to disassemble and should you put it so that it should not stay for long? Is that resource optimization or not? And so there are dilemmas. Yeah. I don't know if one of you have a comment to that.
I might just...
Emily?
Yeah, of course. I might just add, I think that there's no one size fits all. So I completely agree that, there are solutions that bio-based materials are best suited to, and in other instances where perhaps durability is a stronger focus, perhaps some of our more traditional construction materials are used. I think it's really important that we understand what the required life is for a component, and if it's not going to be used for very long, we want to either use a material that is appropriately kind of selected for that kind of shorter life, or it needs to be designed such that that material or component can be recovered and reused, and there's a network and a kind of a framework for how that material can be recirculated within the environment. The way in which we use buildings is ever changing. We've seen a radical shift in the way in which we use buildings post the pandemic, and so designing our spaces such that they're adaptable for those changing needs is really important. But I hope that going forward we will kind of celebrate existing buildings. Yes, they may have a slightly different trend in terms of their aesthetic, but that will be something we'll celebrate because it will have a reduced impact to our environment. So I think it's about using the right material for the right application. There isn't one size fits all.
Thank you, Emily. So using the right materials for the right application, there is no size that fit one thing that fits it all. Thank you very much. I think that was a very good sum up of, maybe I can get the slides again, sorry. Yes. So thank you very much. So our program has all these partners and it's financed by Nordic Innovation. And if you want to know more, we have a lot of information online, and we will make an article summarizing some of your good points. There you can also get the links to the different sources of information. And I think it was a very positive note that it's possible, it needs to be scaled, and we still have innovations going forward in the future that we will receive with open arms, but implementation is needed, and that transition is happening because carbon budgets is not a fantasy, it's real regulation happening and being implemented. So thank you very much to our panelists online, and very much for you, Simone, and for helping the cities to share knowledge and for the products to be there, and to that sometimes provoking new ideas from Dark Matters Labs. And thank you to the audience here in the room, and those online, and everyone organizing this pavilion. Thank you very much.